Most people think that professionals use very expensive cameras and lenses to get that cinematic footage, and I'm here to tell you that this is what they're using. These are called camera filters, and they come in different sizes, different versions, different effects, different everything, and you need to know what to get when. They changed the way I look at exposure and controlling light, going from a correctly exposed shadowy scene to an overexposed one by just changing the way the filter is sitting on the camera. Alright, so when I first got into cameras, I thought that lens filters were optional accessories. Like maybe professionals use them for very specific situations. But once I figured out what they actually do, and that you should use them pretty much all the time, I realized that they change how you control light. And in my opinion, some of these are essential. Me, myself, I at least have an ND on wherever I go. So let's talk ND, CPL, black mist, and UV filters. So before we talk about specific filters, you need to understand one thing. Your camera sensor sees light very differently than your eyes do. And filters help shape the light before it hits your sensor. So let's start with the, in my opinion, most important one. If you're shooting 24 FPS, you want a shutter speed of 1/50 to be the double of that. This is what gives us the natural motion blur that we see during videos and in real life. If you didn't have an ND filter, you could expose in two different ways. You could crank your shutter speed up, removing that motion blur, and you can crank your f-stop up and removing the shallow depth of field. So cranking up the shutter speed removes that motion blur completely, and it makes the footage not fall into the category of cinematic. And if you punch up the f-stop, you lose the shallow depth of field, and again the footage falls into the not cinematic box. This filter is the salvation of cinematic footage, and especially in a very unbalanced daylight scene. So with the ND filter at 24 FPS, we can keep that double frame rate, and we can keep that f-stop at the lowest number possible, and the ISO being on the cleanest number possible. Adding that ND filter, if it's a variable or a set number, is gonna help tremendously. You might have to crank up that ISO a bit just to keep that exposure correctly, but you will keep the cinematic settings that we all love. So basically, an ND filter is pretty much sunglasses for your lens to keep your camera settings at the best settings possible. Alright, so let's talk about the filters that kind of feel like witchcraft. The CPL filter. Watch this. The reflections disappear. How does that work? This is a CPL filter or a circular polarizer. The technical explanation is polarized light. I don't know what that means. So the simple explanation is way more useful. A CPL removes reflections and makes colors and contrast look richer naturally. This is amazing to use when you're both shooting photography and videography for cars, windows, water, real estate, or nature. But don't leave it on all the time. Sometimes reflections add realism, and if you overdo it, the image can look very unnatural. One thing to also think about regarding CPL filters is that they shine the brightest with narrow lenses. Using wide lenses can show what happens behind the magic. You can see how the effect only takes place at certain areas rather than the whole image. Now this next filter is where everything starts getting cinematic. The black mist filter. There's different versions of it and different strengths. You don't want to overdo it on this one, going from something that looks cinematic and clean to something that looks like an FX filter and way too unrealistic. What the black mist filter is doing is killing a tiny bit of contrast on your footage, and it adds a soft bloom on your highlights, making it look a bit more dreamy, but not way too much. Me personally, I use the black mist on everything because I just like the look of it. I use the quarter stop or the half stop depending on how much of the effect I want. A black mist filter softens highlights and lowers contrast slightly. But more importantly, it changes the feel of the image. Notice the highlights. Without the filter, everything feels very sharp and digital. Light blooms slightly, skin softens a little, and the image feels more organic. But this is very easy to overdo. There's 1/8, 1/4 and a half stop of black mist filter. 1/8 or 1/4 in strength is well enough. If you go too strong, even with a half stop, or you start stacking them together, you get this more of a dreamy effect than actually just a subtle touch on your image. My black mist filter is pretty much as holy as my ND filter. It's almost always on my lens. And I use it for portraits, for music videos, for commercial work, for nighttime shots. It just adds that little flair of cinematic. But for super clean corporate or product shots, I keep it as clean as possible. No filters in front of the lens. And finally, the most controversial filter of them all, the UV. UV filters used to matter a lot more during the film camera era than today. Old film cameras used to be sensitive to ultraviolet lights. It could give imperfections to the film rolls that you used to take photos on, but now we use digital cameras. So the protection side of the UV is not really there anymore, but it works as a protection on your actual lens. If you drop your lens straight on the ground, there's a high possibility that the glass on it cracks. But if you have the UV filter on it, that glass could break beforehand. It doesn't protect the sensor from UV, but it protects the glass. So here's the debate about them. The pros about keeping a UV filter on your lens is that it protects the lens. It's easier to clean and it gives a peace of mind. The cons are cheap ones can reduce image quality. They can create extra flaring and it's another layer of glass in front of your lens. The cool thing with lenses is that they rarely drop in price when it comes to secondhand retail. And using a UV just to keep the glass from scratches and dents will keep your glass at mint condition always. Not only is it protection from dropping your lens, but also from scratches and keeping the coating on the glass as new and untouched as possible. If I'm filming in rough environments, yes, I will use one if I don't have another filter on already. If I'm chasing maximum image quality and I'm in a studio space, I will leave it off. So if I'm ranking these filters for the majority of creators out there, I would say ND, Black Mist, CPL, and lastly UV. ND filters solve the biggest practical problem. Black Mist adds style and atmosphere, CPLs create one of the coolest visual changes, and UV filters are mostly about protection. The cool thing about filters is that they're not really about making the footage fake. They're about controlling light intentionally. And once you start understanding light, you stop just recording a video and start shaping your image. Now you might be thinking, there's so many different sizes of filters and I don't know what lens I want to get them for. And here's the solution for that. Buy the filters for your biggest lens. Mine is a size 82, for example. And instead of buying a bunch of different filters, I just buy step up or step down rings. This way I can get all the filters I want in one uniform size and keep it organized and light on the wallet. If this video helped you understand filters a bit better, consider subscribing. Scandinavian Photo will be doing a lot more tutorials like this. Thank you for watching and continue creating.